You'll never amount to anything. The venomous curse spat from my grandmother's lips still echoes in my mind, a chilling whisper that cuts through the hum of my laboratory even now as the world hails me as a groundbreaking scientist. It's a stark contrast, isn't it? The little girl labeled worthless by her own kin, now standing at the precipice of a medical revolution. This isn't just a story about defying expectations. It's about how the very words meant to break me became the fuel that propelled me forward. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about curses and blessings. If you believe in the sheer, unyielding power of the human spirit to overcome anything, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel and let's unlock more stories of true inspiration together. My name is Charlotte, and for as long as I can remember, I was the useless child in my grandmother's eyes. Every achievement, every late night spent hunched over textbooks, every scientific triumph was met with a dismissive wave of her hand or a snide remark. It didn't matter that I consistently excelled or that my passion for unraveling the mysteries of the human body burned brighter than any flame. In her world, I was merely an afterthought, overshadowed by my elder cousin Mark, who seemingly embodied every quality she cherished. This relentless belittling, this constant undermining, planted a seed of conflict deep within me, a quiet, simmering resentment that would eventually burst forth, not as anger, but as an unstoppable force. And that force, born from the deepest wounds of my childhood, was about to be unleashed in ways I never imagined, setting the stage for a confrontation years in the making. Growing up, my grandmother Alice was a constant looming shadow, always quick to diminish me, always eager to highlight my supposed flaws. It felt like a relentless campaign, a systematic chipping away at my self-worth. "Look at Mark," she'd often crow, her voice dripping with admiration. "He's going to be a lawyer, a success. What are you going to do? Charlotte, dream your silly dreams." Mark, my older cousin, was her golden boy, the epitome of everything she valued: traditional success, a clear career path, and what she considered common sense. He was smart, no doubt, but her favoritism was so blatant it was almost comical, if it hadn't been so deeply painful. Every small victory I had, every A on a tough science exam, every award for my research projects in high school was met with a dismissive wave or a sarcastic comment. "Oh, Charlotte got another science award. How quaint. Won't pay the bills, dear." Or even worse, "You're just good at memorizing, not actual thinking. You'll never be truly original." The worst came when I declared my intention to pursue a degree in biomedical science. I remember the exact moment. We were at a family dinner, and I, brimming with nervous excitement, announced my plans. The table went silent. Then Grandmother Alice let out a harsh, barking laugh that echoed through the dining room. "Science, Charlotte, don't be ridiculous. You're going to waste your life on some obscure experiments. You'll just be a leech, a burden on society, always needing someone to support your big ideas." Her words sliced through me, sharp and precise, designed to inflict maximum damage. It wasn't just discouragement. It was a public shaming, a declaration of my worthlessness in front of the entire family. My parents, bless them, tried to intervene, but her will was iron. She simply wouldn't hear it. From that day on, I knew I was on my own. There would be no financial support from her, no encouraging words. In fact, her curse followed me like a dark cloud. I had to scramble for scholarships, working multiple part-time jobs, tutoring, waiting tables, anything to cover my tuition and living expenses. There were nights I survived on instant noodles, fueled by sheer stubbornness and a burning desire to prove her wrong. While Mark breezed through law school, his tuition paid his path, seemingly paved with gold, I was meticulously building my own road brick by painful brick. Every rejection from a scholarship committee, every exhausted late night in the library, every patronizing glance from peers who had it easier solidified my resolve. The unfairness of it all, the deep gnawing sense of being perpetually underestimated and ridiculed, hardened me. It wasn't just about proving myself to the world. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, proving to myself that her words had no power over my destiny. That simmering resentment wasn't bitterness. It was a potent internal engine driving me to work harder, dig deeper, and strive for excellence that transcended her narrow worldview. The feeling of being perpetually less than fueled an unyielding ambition within me, an ambition she inadvertently ignited. And it was this burning ambition that led me down a path, a scientific quest that would soon unexpectedly intertwine with the very family who doubted me setting the stage for a revelation no one saw coming. The years of relentless struggle, the endless nights fueled by caffeine and an unshakable belief in my path, eventually began to bear fruit. While my grandmother scoffed and my cousin Mark climbed the predictable corporate ladder, I was deep in the trenches of my research, driven by a quiet but fierce determination. My lab, modest as it was, became my sanctuary, a place where ideas could flourish and potential cures could take shape. I poured every ounce of my being into understanding the intricate mechanisms of a rare, debilitating genetic disease, one that baffled even the most brilliant minds in the medical community. It was a long, arduous journey fraught with failures and dead ends, but I refused to be deterred. Every setback was just another puzzle piece, another layer to peel back in the complex biological mystery. There were moments of crushing doubt, days when every experiment failed, when the data simply wouldn't align, and the sheer complexity of the human genome felt like an insurmountable wall. But I remembered my grandmother's words, her biting accusations, and they morphed from a burden into a challenge. If I'm so useless, I'd tell myself in the quiet solitude of the lab, then watch what this useless person can do. And then it happened. A series of breakthroughs, small at first, then increasingly significant, began to emerge from my meticulous work. I had been exploring an unconventional approach, one that most established researchers deemed too risky or too complex. It involved gene editing techniques that were still in their infancy, a frontier. Many were hesitant to cross due to ethical concerns and the sheer technical difficulty. But I saw potential where others saw only obstacles. My hypothesis, once dismissed as outlandish, started yielding promising results in preclinical trials. We were seeing a quantifiable, repeatable reversal of cellular damage, a beacon of hope in a disease that offered none. The initial data was so compelling, so unexpectedly positive, that even my most skeptical colleagues began to sit up and take notice. Dr. Eleanor Vance, my brilliant and supportive mentor, who had championed my unorthodox approach when others scoffed, was beaming. Her quiet nods of approval, far more valuable than any public accolade, spurred me on. Word of our progress, whispered at first through academic circles, soon reached the ears of larger institutions and crucially significant investment funds. Major venture capitalists, typically cautious and slow to commit, began expressing keen interest. They saw the potential not just for a new treatment, but for a complete paradigm shift in how we approach genetic disorders. Presentations once given to a handful of peers were now booked solid, with eager investors and pharmaceutical executives all vying for a piece of what I was building. The scientific community, once indifferent or subtly dismissive, was now buzzing with my name with the potential of Charlotte's treatment. It felt surreal, like stepping into a dream I had always chased, but never quite believed would materialize. The useless child was suddenly at the forefront of medical innovation, her name being whispered not with scorn, but with genuine excitement and respect. The financial security that came with these developments was just an added bonus. The true reward was the validation, the quiet acknowledgement that my relentless pursuit of knowledge was finally yielding a tangible impact. It was the antithesis of everything my grandmother had predicted for me. The irony, however, was about to become profoundly sharp. As my research gained momentum, attracting attention from across the globe, A familiar name began to surface in the peripheral communications we received. Among the numerous inquiries and requests for collaboration, there was an increasing urgency from families desperate for a cure, families whose loved ones were afflicted by this very rare disease. And within this tragic cohort, one particular case stood out. A young girl, barely 5 years old, was rapidly declining, her condition worsening despite all conventional treatments. Her father, a man described as desperate but fiercely protective, was reaching out to every corner of the medical world seeking any glimmer of hope. He was relentless, contacting every prominent research institution, every specialist, every emerging biotech firm. His name was Mark, my cousin Mark. The very same Mark who had been grandmother Alice's golden boy, the one constantly held up as the paragon of success I could never achieve. The Mark who ironically was now clinging to the hope offered by the worthless cousin he barely acknowledged. He was reaching out to me to my research without the slightest idea that the groundbreaking scientist he was desperate to connect with was the very Charlotte he had once dismissed as a dreamer. He simply saw Dr. Charlotte, the rising star in biomedical research, the one whose name was now synonymous with hope for this specific genetic condition. The universe, in its own darkly humorous way, had woven a twisted tapestry of fate, bringing the two worlds, the one I had escaped and the one I had built, crashing together. The man whose life had always been a stark contrast to my struggles, whose path had been smoothed by the very person who cursed mine, was now unknowingly seeking salvation from the very person she had relentlessly tried to break. It was a chilling, almost poetic twist of fate, an unforeseen consequence of my grandmother's relentless negativity. The layers of irony were almost suffocating. He who had always been the golden child, the perfect grandchild, now faced a crisis that only the useless scientist could possibly resolve. It was a deeply personal collision of past and present, setting the stage for an undeniable confrontation that would test the very fabric of family and the truth of my own worth. This revelation, quiet at first, then reverberating through my mind with astonishing force, set the stage for an encounter that would go far beyond professional collaboration, dragging long-buried family wounds into the harsh light of public scrutiny. This feels like a continuation from the previous turn, where the user requested to extend Part 3. I will now provide the full Part 3 to ensure it meets the 1,000-word target, focusing on extending the narrative depth, internal monologue, and character's journey, while still adhering to the structure. The air in the grand auditorium crackled with anticipation, a palpable buzz of excitement surrounding my presentation. This was it, the culmination of years of tireless work, the moment I would unveil my groundbreaking treatment to the world. I stood at the podium, a confident smile on my face, ready to deliver the most important speech of my life. My slides were crisp, my data undeniable, and the early results from clinical trials spoke for themselves. I could feel the weight of countless hours, endless experiments, and all those sleepless nights culminating in this very moment. This was my redemption, my undeniable proof. Every step onto that stage felt like a direct defiance of every dismissive word my grandmother had ever uttered. Just as I was about to introduce the core methodology, a ripple went through the front row. My eyes instinctively darted to the movement. My blood ran cold. There, sitting among the potential investors and medical professionals, was Mark, my cousin. His eyes wide with recognition, locked onto mine. A flash of something shock, confusion, maybe even a hint of desperate pleading crossed his face. He quickly looked away, as if hoping I hadn't seen him, but it was too late. The brief connection, the flicker of recognition in his eyes, sent a jolt through me. It was a stark reminder of the twisted fate that had led him of all people to my doorstep. But before I could even fully process his presence, another figure emerged from the side aisle, a figure I knew all too well, one who had haunted my past like a specter, my grandmother Alice. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her presence was a jarring, unwelcome intrusion, like a discordant note in a perfect symphony. My carefully constructed composure began to fray at the edges. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread. As if on cue, she stood up, her eyes narrowing, her face contorted into a mask of pure disdain. The murmurs in the room died down, replaced by an uncomfortable, almost suffocating silence. All eyes, now drawn by her sudden movement, turned to her, then slowly, agonizingly, to me. "That's her." Her voice, sharp and cutting, sliced through the quiet, amplified by the sudden hush of the room. It was laced with a raw, almost feral contempt. "That's Charlotte. Don't listen to a word she says." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. My face burned a scorching heat that spread from my cheeks to my ears. My meticulously crafted world, built on years of academic rigor and scientific integrity, began to crumble around me brick by painful brick. My grandmother Alice continued her scathing assault, her voice rising with each word thick with a venom I knew intimately from childhood. "She's a fraud, a greedy, self-serving opportunist who would lie and manipulate anyone for a shred of fame. She's always been like this, a parasite feeding off others' efforts and taking credit where it isn't due." Her accusations, baseless and cruel, hung heavy in the air, each one a hammer blow to my professional reputation and my deepest, most vulnerable insecurities. "She speaks of healing, but she's incapable of true empathy. She doesn't have the moral fiber to be a healer, let alone a reputable scientist. She's nothing but a common charlatan trying to scam you all with her so-called breakthroughs." Her words were a public lynching, an attempt to tear down everything I had worked for, to expose me as the useless child she always claimed I was. The auditorium was alive with whispers, now a cacophony of doubt, judgment, and outright confusion. Every word she uttered was a direct assault on everything I had fought so hard to become, every ounce of self-worth I had painstakingly built. The years of being called useless, a burden, incapable, crashed down on me with the force of a tidal wave, drowning me in a sea of past hurts. It felt like every past humiliation, every dismissive glance, every cruel joke she had ever made at my expense, had converged into this one horrifying public spectacle. I could feel the eyes of hundreds on me, judging, questioning, perhaps even believing her baseless accusations. My hands trembled uncontrollably, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead and running down my back. My vision blurred slightly, tears stinging my eyes, making my carefully prepared notes an illegible smear. The shame, the raw, visceral humiliation, was almost unbearable. It was a betrayal far deeper than anything I had anticipated, an open wound inflicted in the most public of settings designed to destroy me. She wasn't just attacking my work. She was attacking my very character, my right to exist as a scientist, as a human being worthy of respect. For a terrifying moment, the ground beneath me felt like it was dissolving. The years of striving, the quiet resilience I had cultivated, threatened to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. This wasn't just a professional setback. It was a soul-crushing attack from the one person whose acceptance I had perhaps foolishly still craved deep down in the hidden corners of my heart. My carefully constructed facade of strength was crumbling, exposing the raw, vulnerable girl who just wanted to be seen and valued for who she was. The desperation was overwhelming, a crushing weight that threatened to pin me to the floor, rendering me immobile and silent. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for breath amidst the silent condemnation of strangers and the outright hostility of family. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, to hide, to simply disappear from this nightmare. My mind raced, trying to find an escape, a way to undo this catastrophic unraveling. This was it, the absolute peak of my anguish, the moment I felt truly broken, exposed, and utterly irreparably alone. The silence in the room was punctuated only by the frantic beat of my own heart echoing in my ears like a drum of defeat. I was pushed to the absolute limit, contemplating giving up everything I had worked for. But then, amidst the swirling chaos of doubt and despair, something shifted within me. A spark. A flicker. And in that split second, a profound realization dawned, setting the stage for a turning point that would redefine not just this presentation, but my entire life's purpose and how I would face every challenge from that moment forward. In the brutal silence that followed my grandmother's tirade, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. My carefully constructed professional facade, along with every ounce of personal confidence, felt utterly shattered. It was a complete and utter public dismantling. For a fleeting second, I considered turning tail and running, vanishing from the stage, from this room, from my entire life. The humiliation was a physical pain, a searing burn that encompassed my entire being. My hands, still trembling, gripped the edges of the podium so tightly, my knuckles went white. I could feel the burning gazes of hundreds, their judgment palpable, their whispers like 1,000 tiny needles pricking my skin. This was it, the ultimate defeat, delivered by the very person who was supposed to uplift me. But then, amidst the swirling fog of despair, something happened. My gaze drifted past the faces of the stunned audience, past my fuming grandmother, and landed on one person in particular, Dr. Guar. Eleanor Vance, my mentor. She was sitting in the front row, not with pity, but with an unwavering, almost fierce look of support. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw not condemnation, but a quiet strength, a profound belief that transcended the chaos. It was a lifeline, a subtle but powerful affirmation that snapped me back from the brink of emotional collapse. Her expression was a calm island in the storm of my public shaming, a silent reminder that some people, the right people, saw my worth beyond the hurtful words. Her steady gaze was a silent reminder of countless late nights in the lab, fueled by cheap coffee and an unyielding curiosity. It brought back memories of experiments failing only to be meticulously reevaluated and restarted, sometimes dozens of times. It conjured images of the pure, unadulterated joy of discovery, the thrill of seeing a hypothesis proven, the profound responsibility of working towards a cure for a rare, devastating disease. I remembered the sheer dedication, the intellectual rigor, the uncompromising integrity with which every single piece of my research had been conducted. This wasn't some flimsy house of cards built on lies. This was a fortress of facts constructed with relentless effort, painstaking detail, and an unwavering commitment to scientific truth. Every cell culture, every data point, every sleepless night was a testament to that truth. And then something clicked. The familiar sting of my grandmother's words. "You'll never amount to anything." The curse that had haunted me for decades, echoing in every self-doubt, suddenly felt different. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was a challenge. An internal switch flipped. All those years of being underestimated, of being dismissed, of being told I was worthless, had forged an invisible armor around my spirit. The very words meant to break me, to shackle me to a life of mediocrity had in fact become the unseen engine of my ambition. Every obstacle she placed in my path had only made me more resourceful, more determined to find my own way. Every doubt she cast had only solidified my resolve to prove her wrong, not for her benefit, but for mine. Her curse wasn't a weakness. It was a catalyst, a constant irritating grain of sand that had ultimately created a pearl. It had been the relentless friction that honed my edges, making me sharper, stronger, more resilient than I ever thought possible. The anger and hurt I'd carried for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet, burning fire of purpose. A wave of profound clarity washed over me. This public humiliation, this raw betrayal, was not going to define me. It was not going to be the end of my story. It was, in fact, the final undeniable proof that her opinion, her toxic narrative, held no true power over my identity or my destiny. The pain was still there, a dull ache, a residual phantom. But beneath it surged a powerful, exhilarating sense of liberation. I wasn't fighting for her approval anymore. I wasn't seeking validation from the very source of my pain. I was fighting for the truth. I was standing for my work. I was defending the countless hours, the meticulous effort, the profound ethical commitment that had gone into every single discovery. My life's purpose was far greater than her limited vision. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I felt a new surge of energy, a calm, unwavering determination replace the despair. My trembling hands stilled. My vision cleared the faces of the audience, including Mark's pale, anxious one becoming sharp again. I straightened my posture, my shoulders back, my chin slightly raised, my gaze now direct and resolute. The whispers in the room faded into an indistinct hum, no longer able to penetrate the shield I had just forged within myself. This was my moment, not for recrimination, but for reaffirmation. I would not allow her bitterness to taint the hope my research offered. I would not let her ancient prejudices overshadow a lifetime of dedication and real-world impact. This decision was clear, sharp, and unshakable. I would not cower. I would not retreat. I would meet her baseless accusations not with anger or tears, but with the unassailable power of truth delivered with unwavering composure. I would stand firm, and I would speak not just for myself, but for every life my research had the potential to save. And with that unwavering resolve, I prepared to face not just my grandmother and the skeptical eyes of the audience, but the entire weight of my past, ready to demonstrate the true strength of a woman who had finally transformed her deepest wounds into her greatest power and set the course for her future. With a newfound clarity and a strength that felt entirely new, I took a deep breath, letting the silence in the room amplify my resolve. My grandmother's furious glare held no power over me anymore. Instead of engaging with her personal attacks, I calmly, deliberately turned back to the microphone, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the lingering tension. I understand emotions are running high. I began, my gaze sweeping across the audience. But science, unlike personal opinions, is built on facts, evidence, and peer-reviewed data. I then proceeded to dismantle every one of her baseless accusations, not with anger, but with an arsenal of irrefutable scientific proof. I clicked through my slides, presenting the detailed methodology, the rigorous control groups, the unmistakable statistical significance of my trial results. Each graph, each chart, each data point was a brick in the wall of truth, systematically shutting down her venomous claims. I spoke about the years of ethical oversight, the transparency of our research, and the painstaking process of validation. My confidence wasn't born of arrogance, but of absolute certainty in my work. My commitment is to advancing medical science, to finding solutions for those who suffer. I stated, my voice resonating with conviction. And that commitment stands regardless of personal attacks or attempts to discredit years of legitimate life-saving research. As I spoke, the tide in the room noticeably turned. The murmurs of doubt transformed into whispers of awe. Heads began to nod in approval. People started looking at my grandmother, not with curiosity, but with a mixture of discomfort and quiet disdain. Her face, initially contorted with rage, slowly morphed into a mask of stunned disbelief. Then a chilling, almost defeated pallor. She shrunk in her seat suddenly, a small, pathetic figure against the backdrop of my rising triumph. Then Mark, my cousin, finally stood. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a raw mix of shame and dawning realization. "Charlotte," he began, his voice hoarse. I had no idea. I am so incredibly sorry for everything." He looked from me to his grandmother, then back, a profound understanding dawning in his eyes. The true cost of her relentless negativity. He recognized the depth of her prejudice and the injustice I had faced. It was a silent, powerful acknowledgement of her venom and my vindication. The public, who had just witnessed her dramatic public shaming, now saw the profound truth. The once golden boy was publicly humbling himself before the useless cousin, and my grandmother, trapped in her own web of malice, was left to face the silent, condemning judgment of everyone around her. It was a moment of profound, poetic justice, a satisfying shift in power that resonated deeply. And with the immediate crisis averted and a powerful public statement made, I was now free to focus on the future. A future where my purpose was clear and my passion unburdened by the shadows of the past. From that day forward, my life, both professionally and personally, began to flourish in ways I'd only dreamed of. The public spectacle, once a source of deep humiliation, ironically cemented my reputation. My research, now under the global spotlight, was swiftly adopted, bringing tangible hope and revolutionary treatment to millions suffering from the very disease I dedicated my life to. The weight of my grandmother's words, that suffocating curse, finally lifted. I found a profound sense of peace and freedom in pursuing my passion, helping others, and knowing that my work spoke for itself, far louder than any baseless accusation. While my relationship with Grandmother Alice remained distant and strained, some wounds simply don't heal. I had at last found inner peace. I learned that my self-worth was not and never would be determined by the opinions or negativity of others, even family. This journey taught me that the most powerful revenge isn't bitterness or retaliation, but rather living your truth and achieving your full potential. My story is a testament that negative words can in fact become the most potent fuel for your ascent. They can become the very energy that propels you beyond every perceived limit, allowing you to prove your true capabilities, not to those who doubt you, but to yourself. Have you ever turned a perceived curse into your greatest strength? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who you might inspire.